How's it going all? Today I am joined by one of our co-founders and Chief Technology Officer, Aidan Lawless.
Nope.
Man of many words. I hope he has a few more words to share with us today.
That's why I'm normally in the back office. I don't do too much talking.
Yeah, it's a very rare occasion that we do get him in front of a camera. So, Aidan, I have a few questions that I'm going to pick your brain on.
Sure.
Just all things genetic, where it came from, where it started, where we're at now, what's going to happen in the future. We'll let you just unload on whatever questions come your way. I'm sure you have every answer that I could possibly ask.
Yeah, hope so. Although Paul's more of a historian than I am, I think he understands, he remembers the dates and times and things like that much better than I do. He's a better memory for that kind of stuff. But
well, then we'll lean a bit more on the technology side, but
sure.
I'll probably need a translator by the end of this conversation. Yeah, so I suppose the first off, straight off the bat, like what was the problems that you were trying to solve when you first started thinking about genetic?
Yeah, so if we look back, I think, so you're looking for a history lesson, yeah? History lesson.
I'll take a history. Do I need to get a notepad and pen here? Or?
This goes way back to when you were in school. This was way back. Yeah, so I mean, genetics probably, I would say, our 5th generation of product. Let's say if we look back over our 30 years doing this thing. But by the time we'd hit our 3rd version, which would be built 2 DOS applications, and then the product that became known as V-Line and is now kind of evolved into X-Line. That product was the point at which we had a kind of a good successful period where we were making a lot of inroads here and in the UK and Ireland and the UK. And I think what we've discovered was that even though the market was telling our customers that you should buy the right software and fit your business around it, we were finding that we could sell our product to very similar businesses in the same town, and they would always have things that they did differently that gave them a competitive advantage that they wanted to retain. So they kind of wanted the best of both worlds. They wanted a standard system that could evolve with them over time, but also still embrace the things that made them unique or gave them their uniqueness. And the market we didn't think the market was really feeding that. It was more about telling customers to change. Or we'd find they'd end up adopting something standard and then running something separate on spreadsheets to do their little unique bit. So we were trying to embrace both of that.
Yeah, so it was important that the system was customizable for users in their way, more so than them bending over backwards to fit a system. Yeah,
and I think that the thing was, the way that we solved that at that time was being very flexible from a development process point of view. So when a customer needed something different, we built it for them in the software, but we tried to build it in a way that we weren't, what you might, a term you might hear nowadays, forking the code, which means we weren't building a specific version for that customer. We're going to still try and give them the benefits of any future versions going forward, but give them the customization, the piece that they wanted themselves. So so that put a lot of pressure on our development team, because almost every customer we came across had some idea that they wanted to build themselves, and that meant, so if we want the more customers we need, the more developers we need, and also the more complexity that end up getting fed into the product. So it was around that time, I think, like early, I'm not great with dates, but 2007, 2008, we were talking about looking at some of the technologies were around there at that time to see if there was a technical way to solve this problem. And that's when the idea of what's become known now as the framework internally was kind of born. And we were trying to build something that was extensible and customizable, but also customers could adopt new features as they went as well. So that was the genesis of genetic.
That's the line there, yeah, that is the line there. He's built for this type of stuff.
Any jobs going in marketing, definitely easier than doing development for sure.
Yeah, well, no, we wouldn't work there, but getting your quotes into the marketing world, yeah, that would definitely benefit us. But you said the buzzword there, so extensibility. So what does it mean to you, and why was it such a key part of genetic?
It was important to us because I think it was important to our customers. I mean, the story we tell, there are a million examples of where a customer would say, look, this thing is important to me, and almost totally irrelevant to every other customer we have. And that thing, it was more than just things like, when people think of personalization, they think about changing colors and changing styles and, changing how iconography, that kind of thing. But for us, it was deeper than that. And the example that I give most was that we had a customer who wanted to make sure he could maintain a personal relationship with the traders or the tradesmen who were coming into him every day to buy stuff in his shop. And he would say that it's essential to him that when the customer's in front of him, that he knows the customer's wife's name, the kid's name, some details about him, so that when it came up and he was selling him, he could engage him in conversation and make it feel like even more so of a family business with that customer, because he understood that building those relationships were important to him. So he almost wouldn't, unless, when in the middle of a transaction, he could see what the guy's wife's name or some relevant information about him was on the screen, that he literally wouldn't buy the system. So he thought, and we've never been asked for that since, but if you look at that guy's system today, even though he's evolved through different versions of our product, he still had that information on the screen somewhere, so that the salesperson on the screen can say, hello, Aidan, how's Ursula? And that would be that would be just a bit more engagement with the trade counter, which makes it a more personal experience. So that kind of personalization was important. So it's more than just colors and things. First of all, we have to provide somewhere on the system where you can capture that information that's important. And then you also have to be able to put it on a place on the screen that's relevant and eye-catching to the person who's using it. So allowing that kind of extensibility both at the back end and the front end was very, very important.
So then it would be fair to say that customer feedback in shape and I was going to say genetic, but probably products along the legacy of Intax was important then.
I'd say, I wouldn't have an exact number, people throw out these statistics, but I would say it would be in the high 80s, low 90s% of our backlog would be directly from customers. So 90% of the things that come in there originate with customers. Now, our job is to create that and say, look, this looks like it's a good idea for lots of people, or it's just for that one guy. And then typically when it's for one guy, we kind of think, okay, could we abstract this in a way that maybe this feature's important for this guy once off, but is there something in that gem of that idea that we could build a feature that would be relevant for more than one person? And plenty of examples of that in the way the framework's constructed, and that we would have had in V-Line, we would have had 1,000 options in there that coloured things in different ways depending on different statuses. So for example, if a guy's over his credit limit, let's show his name in red. If he's a good pair, let's show it in green. If the stock level is above the level for the branch, then show it in green, or these kind of things. So we built a feature called Highlight Rules, which allows you to take any business logic condition and cause user interface enhancements like colouring or styling based on that rule. So it allows things to pop out and give people visual indicators, but not stuff that's designed in the back end. The customer can design these rules and the things that are important to themselves,
So I suppose it'll only be fitting then, as we're talking about how the products have developed over time, to maybe dive into the technology side of it here in the back end. Now this is where I will be very shaky, folks. So I suppose like the big thing for me, from what I can see, is like what made you realise that the web client was the right direction for genetic more so than on-premise with IQ? Or
again, you have to go back into the, you're familiar with the Wayback Machine. You have to go back into time there to figure, one of the products that caught my eye when we were, go back again, just talk about how we built that framework. .NET 2.0 came out in 2025, I think became more common in 2005, 2007 became more common. And it was the framework that allowed us to really introduce this kind of extensibility. And there were web elements to it at that point, browser-based elements to it at that point. But at that time, browsers were more about, and still for probably 10 years after, were more about consuming content. So 99% of the use case for using a browser was for reading stuff. It was for consuming information rather than recording stuff. If you're recording stuff, it was like I'm booking a flight and it's 3 pieces of information and it's that kind of thing. But one of the products that always caught my eye at that time was Outlook Web Access, which was Microsoft's attempt to put Outlook, which is their popular, obviously everybody uses this desktop mail client, back then into a browser. I think it came out in one of the early versions of Exchange. And it caught my eye because it said, that's a direction that the technology is going, because the method of deploying a browser application was basically giving somebody a link, go to this link and follow it. There was no local installing of software or having to manage all that, and if they needed to deploy an upgrade, they could do it almost seamlessly in the background. So customers were getting the benefit of that. So it's always been an appealing mode of deploying software, right back as far as that. Outlook Web Access was, again, that kind of era before late 2000s or something that it became kind of popular, But you could see over time how much it evolved. People stayed with the desktop version of Outlook because desktop applications were easier if you're typing a lot of information quickly and sending emails and creating calendar entries. It was faster to do it on a desktop application that was more keyboard friendly, whereas those kind of things were still fairly difficult on the web. So, I mean, I've always thought that the way to deploy these kind of tools is across the web, but if you match that with our requirement to make everything extensible and customizable and configurable for the user as much as possible, those two things didn't really overlap. And we've took a lot of time dipping into that technology over time to figure out what the point was to jump back in. And we've had a few attempts where we'd spent 2 or 3 months. Let's see what's changed since the last time we looked at this, and evaluate it again and see what products were emerging in the market that caught our eye. And but it's been a constant kind of evolution over time, exploring that.
So you said you attempted it a few times, or you were dabbling back into, say, trial and error, see if it's ready for this concept yet.
I would have said maybe every 9 months, you're always following what's happening in that technological space, and you're always watching people who are market leaders, what they're doing in that space, and we'd constantly explore that and say, okay, is it time to have a look at this again? But I felt we were pushing the boundaries of what you could do with a Windows application at that time, so we knew that if we were going to do the same with the browser technology, it would have to catch up, I think, to what people were doing with Windows. We kept dipping in and out to see what what emerging technologies were happening that supported these kind of clever applications on the web. I mean, jQuery was a big technology that added an awful lot of capability to web applications, but it just didn't quite hit the mark for us when we experimented with it. Probably in the early, AngularJS was released in 2010, 2011, so around that kind of time. It was really the first one that we thought, actually, there's something pretty cool here that gets us close to where we thought we might want to be. And the key thing for us was we didn't just want it to be the fact that it's an ERP application in a browser that made us different, because there were starting to be so many of those kind of products out there. So unless we could take the thing that made us different in the desktop world into the browser, it really wasn't worth the investment, and that's why things like jQuery failed. We just didn't think we could push the boundaries enough with it. So AngularJS was a really interesting technology for us. We spent a lot of time playing with it and started to feel like we had a bit of momentum behind it. Had maybe 18 months worth of work in AngularJS done, where we had a lot of the kind of POC stuff completed, and we figured actually we can get this pretty close. But unfortunately, we started to run into, as scale came into the equation, and we started to add more and more complex views, because an ERP application is not like booking a flight. You can have some of our sales order entry screens can have hundreds and hundreds of properties on the screen at any time, and they're all interacting with each other. So we found that once you introduce any kind of scale like that, performance started to be a problem, and that's something that we definitely weren't going to bring out a browser product that was slower than our desktop application, and so that became a challenge for us. But that, coupled with the fact that Google then took AngularJS and deprecated it, and basically said, we don't like the way we built this, and we're going to come out with a new product that's going to replace this, meant that the 18 months or almost 2 years worth of investment was about to go in the trash can. So which was a little frustrating. Although in some ways, looking back, if we'd have kept along that path, we would have run into some different challenges. So so we kind of went back to the drawing board a bit and said, okay, well, if AngularJS is not going to work for us, what's the next choice? And there were a couple of, Angular seemed like the obvious one, because Google had replaced, it looked like they'd taken all the learnings from AngularJS and built a whole brand new framework that looked very impressive from the start. One of the initial tests we did with it was we tried something at scale, so lots of complicated values on the screen, and straight away some of the performance problems that were in AngularJS were gone. So we thought, okay, this could be the real thing. But the problem with problem, at least for us, with something like Angular is it's very what they call opinionated as a framework. Okay, so it's like they give you the tools and the patterns to use, and they constrain you and say, look, provided that you do it this way, we'll guarantee scale. So in other words, if you build a really complicated enterprise application using this, the underlying infrastructure and the components, they'll support that over time and manage that. And when you're introducing new people into the team, they have the right kind of infrastructure. It's built in a way that they're easier to onboard and the thing scales in a better way. So they're the kind of reasons why a lot of web design companies have chosen Angular, because it scales really well. As I said, it's opinionated, which is an interesting word they use for comparing frameworks. And this is when we were comparing React on the other side, which is not an opinionated framework. And to give you, I know that sounds like a strange phrase to use when you're talking about a piece of software that's not AI. Just what opinionated versus non-opinionated means is the best example is if you imagine getting a desk from IKEA and it's flat packed and it's got all the pieces on the floor, and you've got a set of instructions, and if you build it and put it together, it will be the desk that's in the picture. That's the best idea of an opinionated framework. All the tools are there, all the bits, and if you build it this way, it will look like this, and it won't collapse after 5 days of writing on it. A non-opinionated framework will be more like Lego, where you have all the pieces, and they give you a guideline and say, look, if you really want, you can build a boat or a car or whatever out of these things, or you can decide to build your own thing. So React was a more unopinionated framework than Angular, if that's the way that we would compare the two of them. The thing is, with an opinionated framework like Angular, if you build a desk and then you decide you want a drawer, it's a different thing. You have to, either go out and buy a new desk from IKEA or whatever it is. But I'm sorry, I'm dragging this analogy out now too far, but that's...
No, I feel like I'm a developer now. It's IKEA set up to Lego. That's it, I'm in there.
Yeah, that's a choice, yeah. The thing is that Angular was appealing to us because we knew that the ERP application that we were about to build, or the user interface for the ERP part of the framework that we were about to build, was going to be quite big. It's going to be really large. And those kind of guardrails that an opinionated framework give you are very appealing. Test frameworks and all these things are very, very appealing. So we decided, let's have a go with Angular and see where that takes us. So we spent probably another 18 months, I'm not exactly sure of the timeline again, but probably 18 months again, trying to push the boundaries with Angular. Again, got pretty close, hired some new people into the team that Angular experience, which was hard to do at that time because it was still fairly new, but got some really good people. But we started to bump against those guardrails quite a bit. We wanted to, be able, if we built a desk for, I'm going to drag the analogy out again, if we built a desk for a customer and he said, I'd love to have a drawer on this desk, we were we were struggling to do that in a way that made sense, that we're at runtime when the application was running where we could add these capabilities in dynamically, was something that we were definitely struggling with. So all this time, the guys who were working on the project were looking at the challenges that they were bumping into and kind of looking jealously across the fence into the other grass, going, actually React could solve some of these problems for us. And that was when we decided once again to drag 18 months worth of code into the trash can. So that's it's a difficult message to sell because we probably during the AngularJS time had committed to saying, look, we think we're close to this, and I'm sure at this point people were fed up hearing from me saying we're really close, and then twice being told, sorry guys, we need to bin all the work we've done twice, because again, just to be another product that was delivered in a browser wasn't enough for us. We knew the thing that made us different, and just didn't really want to compromise on that. So at that point we went back, hired more people, more kind of people who understood React better, got some really strong people into the team, and started again.
So 36 months of thereabouts of just, no, I was going to say playing around. You have Lego on my mind now of Lego and IKEA bits, but
well, probably before that we probably, I mean, I still have all the code. I still have the stuff that we've done before that, maybe in the intact museums or the genetic museums of the future.
That's just you saying, like, I'm not letting this go. I spent so much time on it.
People are nostalgic for stuff. Like, we still go back and look at code that we built I can still build the DOS application, which was written in Clipper 30 years ago, and still run it on a virtual DOS block, which is always interesting to do every so often.
I don't know if that's a party piece or not, but I can still build a DOS application. Yeah. I don't know whether it shows your age either.
We still had customers up until, I don't know, definitely less than 2 years ago.
Yeah,
we had a customer who was using it, yeah, and we were trying to breathe life into their new hardware and find ways to run this old technology. It's a bit like the Voyager spacecraft going out trying to find guys who could work on this stuff, but it's still there, still doing work for people, you know.
So then React came into play. So what changed with React that made it the better option in the end?
It was that idea of it not being, the guardrails not being as rigid compared to the way with Angular. We just knew that even though we would probably benefit at scale from having a an opinionated framework like Angular controlling us, I mean, it just, we bumped against the challenges that came at us were like the dinosaurs testing the fences in Jurassic Park. It was constantly like, can we do this, can we do that? And we just ran into these things, and we would have been compromising and probably eroding the benefit that Angular was giving us by constantly kind of drawing outside the lines to try and make things happen. So React gave us that flexibility and freedom to do more things at runtime than we could have done with Angular. So
obviously with changing so much, the technology stack changing so much, like what would you say your toughest lessons that you learned throughout that period, or what were the biggest things that you took away from that, given that you probably, as you said yourself, not throwing it in the trash can, but there was obviously no losses, only lessons.
Yeah,
so what were the lessons?
It's that Kobe Bryant thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I love that. I love that line.
You win or you learn. Yeah, and I think that's very true. Here it's very true because, I mean, I think when you do research into this stuff, you have to, if you don't get an outcome, and even sometimes if you do get an outcome, you have to really understand what you've learned during the process. It has to be, you need to document the things that works, the stuff that don't work, why they don't work, because when you come to the test, the next set of frameworks or the next technology that's coming out, you need to apply the same rigors to it and see, what works and what doesn't work. So, I mean, it's the culmination of all of those things that when we started with React, in the first few months we kind of knew, performance was really good, runtime customization was good. The things that we ran into in Angular we could test really quickly because a lot of the guys would have been testing the stuff that we couldn't do in Angular in React anyway to see if the same kind of restrictions. So all those things were beneficial as we went through it. We also had some good partners along the way. We've had a great partner in Developer Express on the desktop for some of the component technology like our grids and views and stuff like that, and our reporting system that we use. They're really good at building those tools, so we partner with them. Same on the React side, there were a couple of companies like Telerik who were building the Kendo components. They were pushing the boundaries of React as well, and we were leveraging some of that as we went along too. What was really interesting about the React world was that it was funny, as we went through the process with Angular, it felt like the product was going in a different direction than we were, whereas with React, it felt like anytime we bumped into something that looked like it was going to be a bit of a speed wobble, you'd find one of the guys would come in and say, oh, actually, that's going to be fixed in the next version, or it's going to be a new feature in the next version, or they're changing the way that works. So it felt like all of a sudden we were rowing in the same direction as the people who were building the framework,
Yeah, so it's more so of, because I always find that one of the key things in here, and like you said at the start of the interview, is not bending your processes to this is what the product can do and you need to change what you do as a business to this. And it's almost like in the technology stack they were using, that's kind of the direction it was going. It was Angular was saying, no, it needs to be done like this, while React gave you the freedom to say this is how you want to do it, customizable, deliver it the way that we want to go.
And it's the right horse for the right race. I mean, Angular is very successful for a lot of companies that do things, and so I don't want to sound like it's a negative thing against Angular, choosing one or the other. It's very successful for a particular thing, and we thought it would be successful for us, but it just meant us compromising on too many other things.
Staying true to the morals of the company, gotta love it.
staying true to the vision, and that's a key thing. And it's the thing about it was it must have been so frustrating to hear over years. And I know I've attended plenty of board meetings where I kept saying it's nearly there, we're almost there, and then having to say, sorry, we had to bin that last 18 months, but we're nearly there. We made the right decision. That can be a challenging message to hear. And I'm certainly grateful for Paul and the other board members as well, who kind of trusted us through this and said, okay, look, we've done it before. We trust them to get it done again. And make the right decisions. And I think without that kind of trust, we wouldn't be where we were today, because we would have compromised, because we could have built something that would have been, would have ticked a lot of boxes, but it wouldn't be the product that Genetic is today if we had compromised along the way. So
that's probably a nice lead into a question that I probably want to know now. Now that the company has scaled much larger than what it was when you first started, when it was yourself and Paul just knocking around wherever he was wearing Dundalk at the time.
Smoking 20 cigarettes a day above a bar in an office.
Yeah, cut that out. But it's that's raw honesty there. It's have you found that the vision of the company, or how the company operates, obviously with more numbers it obviously operates, you get more like different departments, like I'm sure when it was you and Paul, you didn't have a HR department, but I mean, like, it's in terms of how the place and the vision for the company, has that pivoted or changed at all, or has it always been the same idea, providing the same solution? Not the same solution, but you want to offer the same
services.
The same service, yeah. Sorry.
No, I think what's been really from my side anyway, I think that we seem to have attracted people who like to solve problems, and instead of just giving them the documentation for the application and how you should deliver it, we're giving them documentation, but also a set of tools that allows them to solve those problems in different ways. So what's allowed us to scale is that the ability to deliver those customizations, whether that customizations and business logic applications, without having to rely on a development team to do that, gives our consulting teams, the PMO teams, and this tools to deliver real value without having to depend on development teams. And I think those problem solvers have been attracted to us, and I think on that, so they then turn to solve problems for customers. I think the philosophy has stayed true over time.
Yeah, definitely, and you can see it, and even with from being in my role as an account manager last year, from speaking to customers, you can definitely get that sense, because a lot of customers have been with us a long time, and even the ones that are newly coming on board, even with the implementation team, you can kind of see it, that it's, as you said, this problem solving element, as much as people in any go live using any system can feel the pain. It's the satisfaction of knowing and giving them the tools to say, like, you can figure this out, you can receive the training, you can get it, and you can customize this whatever way you want. I feel like I don't think that has changed too much from customers who've been with us 20 years to even who've just joined us recently. It's the same sort of win that they're getting out of using the system. And
I think the important thing is that, I see the ERP system as being central to most the parts of the business, but the two ends of any business can be really tightly connected. Somebody wants to make a change in the sales process, affects the guys in the warehouse. Unless you've got a system that can, where you can adopt those operational changes at both ends and apply them some way in the software, you end up with somebody doing something on a spreadsheet on one end and a guy on the other end receiving some details in an email and having to dictate that. And those processes can fracture very quickly and get out of control, and then it prevents that business from scaling. So the more we can take things and adopt ideas that people need to implement in their business and do it in the software, the more it helps their own business to scale and control those things.
Yet again, you're almost like teeing me up for these questions. It's great. But obviously, when changing from an on-server or an on-premises version and then going into the browser, it obviously comes with some sort of risks of just letting the customer go into that realm, which we've had an experience before. So can you speak on that, of things that you thought about, or certain risks you would have preempted by letting the customers go into the browser world with their ERP system?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about deploying software in a browser, I mean, if you take most desktop applications are deployed, even if they're in a virtual environment, even if they're in a hosted environment, they're typically deployed in a way in using technologies like terminal services or Citrix, where you're accessing the content in a fairly safe way. It's like it's like you're looking at a window into the software. You're looking at images and stuff coming back. There's not a lot of data, secure data getting pushed outside your network. So they're quite secure, and that's why they're used for large enterprise kind of applications. Once you start to publish data over the public internet to a browser, there are definitely more what they would call attack vectors. Sounds like something out of Star Trek, but attack vectors are points of weakness in a company that somebody can attack. So managing that can be quite complex and quite expensive, and quite onerous for somebody to do. So we have thought a long time about whether or not it made sense to allow customers to host their own instance of Genetic, for example, run it on premise and allow them to access it anywhere. But I felt it was quite irresponsible to do that, because there's a lot of responsibilities involved in keeping it maintained and keeping updated, because most applications, whether they're built on React or Angular or whatever the technology is, you're typically relying on lots of third-party small libraries and stuff like that make the web experience better. And they're constantly being checked for vulnerabilities. So you need to be you need to be efficient at how you manage your updates and how you deploy them. So also, Genetic itself is quite complicated as an application. We use the kind of technology that's involved in things like online gaming for how we do communications between client and server. So it's quite complex to deploy, and so it doesn't really make sense to us to be trying to manage remote installs of this for customers. It introduces another risk for that customer's business. That's bigger than I see. It's bigger than moving their stuff off premise and into a cloud infrastructure provider like AWS, for example. So it's about balancing those risks.
So secure. What's the line I'm trying to think of? Is it secure, scalable, and accessible?
Yeah, I mean that's what cloud is all about. Secure, scalable, and accessible. Yeah.